So
we're,
hi
I
there
think
again.
we're all
I think
here.
we can give a start.
Okay. Okay, great. I'm really delighted to welcome Paul Patton, who is the director of the Limerick and Education Training Education and Training Board, and also Martin Curnane, who's Deputy Director of the Limerick Clare Education and Training Board. And they're going to talk specifically about two things. One is it's impossible to talk about youth employment and youth training and education without talking about the structure that supports the training system. So I asked Paul to come along and give an overview of the education and training boards, because there's been quite a lot of structural change in Ireland over the last, I think it's, Paul, isn't it fair to say, about the last 10? Yeah. And it's really important to contextualize that. So I don't want to hog the limelight, just I'm delighted that they can be here. Now, Paul has to go away at 12 o'clock, but Martin is going to continue with the questions and answers, and if the hopefully the presentation will have finished by then. Okay, so without further ado, Paul, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, I'll just try to pull up the presentation. Hopefully everybody can see the presentation.
Yes, that's
there.
Perfect.
So hello to everybody, and again, as Angela said, my name is Paul Patton. I am the Director of Further Education and Training with Limerick and Clare Education and Training Board. And this morning, I just want to give you a brief overview on the Limerick and Clare Education and Training Board, and then Martin will give you an overview on Youthreach Provision within Limerick and Clare. First of all, Limerick and Clare Education Training Board, the ETB, is a statutory authority that was founded in 2013 under the Education Training Act of 2013. Prior to that, in Ireland, you had 33 vocational education committees, and those 33 vocational education and training committees were disbanded, and 16 new education and training boards were established. And in the Midwest of Ireland, covering Limerick City, Limerick County and County Clare, the Limerick and Clare Education and Training Board was established. And then in 2014, the training services in Ireland were the responsibility of an agency called FAS, F-A-S, and the FAS then was disbanded, and all the training functions of FAS came in under Limerick and Clare Education and Training Board in July of 2014. So Limerick and Clare Education and Training Board is responsible for, has statutory responsibility for education and training, youth work, and a range of other statutory functions in Limerick and Clare. So, for example, we have, as you can see there, community national schools. We have now 3 community national schools. We have a range of second level schools and a range of further education colleges and centres across the region. To give you an idea, the 16 ETBs in Ireland in 2019, we would have had, between students and learners, we had 425,133 students and learners. So if you see Limerick and Clare down there in the map of Ireland, in the Midwest there, Limerick and Clare, there was 36,107 students and learners in various activities in Limerick and Clare. In 2019, approximately 25,000 of those were in further education and training, and the remainder were a mixture of primary education that would be children from 4 years of age up to, say, 11 years of age. And the remainder then would be in post-primary education from, say, 12 years of age up to 18 years of age. Just to give you an idea of Limerick and Clare Education Training Board, we have approximately 2,500 staff, and those staff are a mixture of, the majority of those staff would be what we call learning practitioners, or teachers, or tutors, or instructors, and then our administration staff. We are the largest employer in the Midwest of Ireland with 2,500 staff. We have 25 post-primary and community national schools. So we have 3 community national schools, and we have 25 other primary buildings, facilities that cater for students in the 12 to 18-year-old bracket. And we have 28 further education and training colleges and centres across the region. And we work with approximately 300 different community groups through a lot of our community education and community development programs. So in 2019, there's approximately 38,000 student learner enrollments in 2019. And as I said, roughly 25,000 of those plus are in further education and training. We also have a music school, a dedicated music school, the Limerick School of Music. It comes under my remit in further education and training. And we also have 2 music generation programs, and we will have a third one next year. But those music generation programs are specifically targeted at disadvantaged students, be they in primary school or post-primary school, where they may not have the means, the financial means of going to a private music tuition. So this is where they are given free vocal and instrumental access to music. And a lot of that is supported by our Irish band U2 that you might be familiar with, and Bono and The Edge, etc. They basically provide a significant amount of funding towards that actual music generation program, which is a national program, by the way, as well. We approximately have 173 million of an annual budget, and of that, approximately 70 million, which is even some of our other third level institutions in the country. 70 million of that is under the further education and training budget. So I would have a responsibility for approximately 70 million of an annual budget. And we have approximately 100 million currently in various capital investment programs. And just to give you an idea, statutory education and training body across Limerick and Clare, we have to manage not only ETB education, but we also have to manage other types of education. So, for example, we're often asked by the government to build primary schools or post-primary schools on behalf of other patron bodies, not just the ETBs. That's very important, that our reach is further just than ourselves, under the legislation. Just to give you an idea of the further education and training provision itself, in 2019, we had 25,310 beneficiaries over a range of different types of provision, and over 31 skills clusters. We had 2,617 different courses, full-time versus part-time courses in 2019 across, as I said, those 31 skills learning clusters. In 2019, we provided 9,632 awards the majority of those would be at level 5 and level 6 on our national framework of qualifications. Within the FET division, there are 773 staff as of 2019, and that has increased in 2020. And as I said earlier, there's 28 FET colleges and centres, and then there's 37, within those colleges and centres, there's 37 QQI, which is our quality assurance statutory body. We've 37 registered centres. And in 2019, we had 58 million of funding in 2019. In 2020, that funding is approximately now 70 million on the last count.
Sorry, Paul, for interrupting you there. We just had a question about what is a learning cluster?
A learning cluster might be, say, for example, beauty therapy. There's 33 learning clusters in Ireland, and one might be, for example, hairdressing beauty therapy. So that'll be a learning cluster, or one might be in the hospitality area, you know, or one might be, say, in transport logistics distribution, for example, would be another learning cluster. Okay,
thanks, Paul.
Okay. So that just gives you a much more focused map of Limerick and Clare. As you can see, Limerick City is in the centre there. To the south of Limerick City is County Limerick, and to the north then and west there you can see County Clare. So that gives you an idea of the spread of our further education and training centres across that. You can see in Limerick City there's multiple sites. So for example, we also provide the education and training to the prisoners in Limerick Prison. So we have an education unit in the prison, and we have 17 full-time staff in that education unit in the prison, providing access to various types of education and training provision there as well, you know. Just to give you an overall idea that the whole focus of further education and training is to offer a wide variety of lifelong education options or opportunities to anyone over 16 years of age. Now, we can go down to 15 years of age, but we also say, for example, when we're doing family learning, we might be working with parents and very young children. So, for example, we have a program called My Baby and Me, where we look at the linguistic and the oral development of children with their parents, you know, and those children could be as young as 6 months of age upwards, and we're looking at the language, the linguistic development of those actual children. And we work a lot also in the early education settings as well, in terms of what's known as Little Voices or Little Voices provision. So 16 years of age, it masks the fact that we also work through our family learning with parents and also a lot of younger children. But a lot of that type of provision includes apprenticeships, traineeships, our post-leaving certificate programs, community and adult education, and core literacy and numeracy provision as well. And in Ireland at the moment, there is a new department has been established recently. In Ireland, you had one department, the Department of Education and Skills, which had total responsibility for all education in Ireland, from primary up as far as higher education. That department now has been split into two separate departments. So the Department of Education looks after everything, say, from primary education and post-primary education. And there's a new department now called the Department of Further and Higher Education. And it looks after everything in the further education and the higher education space, you know, that tertiary education space. And at the moment, further education training courses are provided on levels 1 to 6 on the National Framework of Qualifications in Ireland, similar to other countries in Europe. We have a 10-level framework of qualifications, and mostly the higher education institutions would look after level 7 to 10 on that framework, 10 being, say, your PhD, doctorate, etc. Further education training tends to look after mainly levels 1 to 6 on that national framework of qualifications. In terms of Youthreach provision, we would have 10 further education training centres within which we would offer Youthreach provision. And in the majority of those cases, bar 1 or 2, Youthreach provision is integrated in a further education training centre where there are other types of provision being offered as well. We do have 1 or 2 Youthreach centres that are standalone, that only in that centre you have Youthreach provision, but our objective is to build a campus model where Youthreach provision is delivered in an integrated manner with other types of provision. So, for example, our literacy service might be involved in supporting the literacy development of Youthreach participants undertaking some of the Youthreach provision programs. And in 2019, the number of Youthreach learners across Limerick and Clare was 570. At this stage, I might call on Martin to give us, are you able to come in there, Martin?
I am indeed. I am indeed.
You can just tell me to click on, Martin. I'll click on for you.
I will. Good morning, everybody. You're welcome to Limerick City. Just to say, normally when groups call on myself and Paul to do a presentation like this, we do bring them around to our Youthreach centres just to meet both the staff and the learners, and we get some of the learners maybe to present as well. So my job title is Manager of Youth Provision, and Youthreach is just one of the provisions that I work with, and I'm accountable to the ETB and manage, and I'll talk about that. I have a long history working in Youthreach. The first Youthreach centre was actually founded in Limerick City, where we're based. I worked in that Youthreach centre. I've seen a lot of changes over the years, and if I was to say it to anybody, and that's why I came on this morning when I heard some people are thinking of introducing provision in your country, really delighted, and if I can help, support and assist in any way, I would like to. It's where I've been lucky to find where my career is. Over the last 30 years, if I was to say anything to you, my advice is keep the learner at the centre of all your planning. They have excellent ideas. They are young, they're resilient, they all have huge potential, but listen to them. And along the way, you'll make mistakes, but learn from them. If I can help in any way. So as Paul said there are 10 Youthreach centres across Limerick and Clare. They all vary in different sizes. And I suppose the key aspect is even in 2 counties, we support them in developing and making sure they have autonomy within those different parts of the region. And there's been huge evolution along the way. Can I just say, feel free to stop me anywhere along the way to ask a question. I'd like to make it a little bit informal.
Thanks, Martin.
Because I do like to talk a lot about my career and the programme, but please stop me along the way.
Okay.
I'm not going to hone in on the slides. The slides are really there for your records. And at the end, I've added a few slides as well, but it would have taken too long. And they're just key aspects of the programme and how it's evolved and changed over the years. And I won't have everything in this today, but if I can help, support and assist, but Paul and I will come back to you. So very simply, the Youthreach programme there, its purpose is to work with young people and that want to return to education and training. And what's very, very important for me is not to use the words early school leavers. These are young people that are very courageous, and I interviewed them over 20 years when I was a manager in a Youthreach centre, and they come in and they prepare and they want to come back to Youthreach and they have a future. And that's the key aspect of that. So it's young people that are returning. The target profile, the reason I put this up is to bear in mind that financially, when you're applying for funding and also when you're being audited, you need to know your target group, you need to know your outcomes, and you need to be achieving them. And that's from the funding point of view. And from a holistic point of view, I suppose what's critical here is that you realise and support the potential of the young people and get them back on track. And as Paul said, having progression pathways for them. And really it is about eliminating barriers. And so, you know, a lot of young people do have problems, issues. There's a lot of, you know, I would use the word even chaos sometimes in the home. And really our purpose along the way is to give them solid, orderly, safe learning environments. So, okay, I've kind of touched upon this already, and it is to say that I wouldn't go down the route of the funding mechanism which talks about disadvantaged, poor literacy, poor numeracy. I believe in an asset-based approach. Some of my colleagues don't, they believe in a needs approach, but I think you need to know what the needs are, but you also need to know what the assets. And over the years, I suppose I would have interviewed thousands of young people to join placements across Youthreach. And I have to say, every one of them wants a chance. The young people we work with, they come from the most vulnerable and marginalized areas in society. They are very, very vulnerable. They have a lot of challenges, but they are hugely resilient. A lot more resilient, I think, than I was at their age, and I know I was. Each and every one of them has huge potential. And it's important to know very clearly over the years, when you challenge young people, they do know the difference between right and wrong, and they do know how to treat each other respectfully and mannerly. I just see a hand up there. Want to fire in a question to me?
Martin, hey. I have just one question. Can you explain the assets-based approach? Because we've been hearing a lot about the needs approach, and this is the first time we hear about the assets-based approach. Please.
Delighted. For me, it's utterly my philosophy. When young people present to Youthreach, you can do assessments, needs, analysis of the young person. But sometimes, really, I would divert the other way. When somebody presents, I have a young person presenting to me for an interview this Friday, and she wrote a letter to me. And it's about connecting with young people and seeing what their strengths are and finding to make a connection on with the very simplest thing. And for me, it's the very simplest thing. I saw young people, lots of problems and difficulties over the years, coming in, sitting down and presenting for an interview. And that very first connection where they communicate to me why they want to come back, what the challenges are, and the honesty and the integrity. So for me, it's about attitude, it's about values, and it's about imparting and that interaction. So it's about strengths. And with strengths and seeing the good in people, seeing their skill set. But more so for me over the years, it's always been about attitude and values. All the rest will come afterwards. And I think Paul will testify, when we interview our staff, it's very similar, because you are now getting people with similar competencies and skills to work with our learners. But it really is about attitude and interpersonal skills. Is that okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. This diagram here, really, this is the department, and as Paul said, we have a new department now, but these are the key objectives of Youthreach if you look up the website. And for me, I can sum them up very, very simply. It's both the social, emotional and intellectual development of young people. That's what we are about. It's relationships. I had a slide that I deleted during the week, but it's probably the most important slide, and it is relationships, relationships, and relationships. In a Youthreach centre, I suppose my managers are very fortunate that they know I've been in that role before, and I'm there to support them, because the key purpose in their role is to manage the relationships and support their staff in fostering relationships. And relationships then, positive relationships, as you spoke about assets earlier, they do promote the social, emotional and intellectual development of young people. Second chance education, first of all, it's first class education and training. And we spoke about that earlier to start. Sometimes by calling it second chance education, it is the mother of actually the person I'm interviewing on Friday said to me, all she wants is a second chance. And we're there to give them a chance. And my decision on that person getting a place, whether it's in a leaving cert or not, will not only be down to literacy and numeracy, it'll be down to her attitude and where she intends to go and how she does in the interview. So as we spoke about second chance education, it is another chance, but it's important because it may be the last chance, and it's about building confidence, building relationships with the young person, and not getting down into whether, you know, there's poor literacy and numeracy at the first interview, at the first meeting, making people feel welcome. My analogy over the years is when we just had 3 centres in Limerick City was the restaurant analogy. People will come to your centre or come to a restaurant when you provide a good service. And over the years, we've had excellent staff, we've had an excellent service, but now we even have better facilities and better resources. The key aspect Paul spoke about there was integration of further education and training opportunities. The Youthreach Programme, or the Youthreach Provision, and the C2C provisions Paul spoke about earlier, one of our key targets is progression, both internal progression within a Youthreach centre, so progression onto traineeships, onto employment, onto other aspects of further education and training. That's actually embodied in my job description. And that's where we're at. It's not always about straight into employment. Last year, and I'm probably going off on a tangent, out of the 500 learners there, over 130 progressed on into different courses, mainly into PLC courses, apprenticeships, but some on to employment. The promotion of social inclusion, for me, that is very simply summed up. Every young person that comes in the gate of, whether it was our son or daughter that leaves school, I have a vision, and the vision is that they get an opportunity, they feel included, and another chance to move on and get their education and training. I think what's very, very important, just to highlight it here, and it'll probably pop up in another slide, is intrinsic motivation, Angela. And intrinsic motivation for me is the young people that presented over the years for interview again, and this is about their needs. They wanted to come back, but they also wanted to get the same accreditation as their counterparts that stayed in school. And very much in Limerick City, we would have gone down the route of leaving cert, junior cert, and state exams. I suppose our philosophy is around phenomenology. Even if we have 100 learners, 13 learners in a centre, it's about getting down and getting to know the individuals. We have small classes and small centres, and phenomenology is the key aspect of our ethos. The second bullet there for me is a very, very important one, and I'm kind of a traditionalist, but I do believe that the young people that come from the various backgrounds and areas, and what's going on, you know, all the social disruption that's going on in the moment, is having a very clear structure, having very clear boundaries. Our code of conduct would have a zero tolerance on violence, zero tolerance on drugs. And that would have evolved over a couple of years. And that goes back to our vision that you'll see later on, which is a safe, learning and respectful environment. Paul touched upon it there earlier when we defined what Youthreach is about and what the CTCs are about. And what's very clear in the third bullet there is out of school settings. Youthreach is not based, like in France, you have micro lycées and they have small centres based in schools. Paul and I worked on a project here in Limerick City where we tried a kind of a blend of a micro lycée and an off-site project. And the outcomes ended up that the people that progressed actually from that project ended up coming to Youthreach anyway. So I call it the divorce aspect of the program. Sometimes relationships break down with young people in schools. They need a fresh start and they need to leave the school. And we would always encourage them to go back. But when it happens and they move on. So Youthreach is in an out of school setting, not like in other national programs. Okay. I already spoke about it earlier, high expectations. It's a fresh start and you will build relationships that are high on expectations around mutual respect, manners, courtesy, and dignity. That is the embodiment of the Youthreach ethos, and that every child that comes in if it was our own. That is my vision over the years and the vision of our staff. They actually look after the young people and form relationships that are very much parental-like in certain roles. It's not just a teacher, it's all the rest. Here, I've kind of discussed most of this of Youthreach provision. I just said I'd put it up in a diagram for you, and it is the holistic approach. And you can see the biggest hexagon in the middle is the most important one. It's about the learner. And as I would say, the learners will tell you their needs. They come up with fabulous ideas and how to evolve and how to change a centre. And I would say over the years, they've come up with better ideas than I have. What's very, very critical to where we're embodied is youth provision is under the FET division. And if you look over there, the hexagon with vocational training. One of the aspects I would have seen over the years is we had smaller schools, technical schools, and they would have had an awful lot of vocational training. They would have catered for young people that would have liked to do the practical subjects. I would have had young people that would have, can we stick on that one for a minute, Paul?
Yeah.
Thank you. I would have seen young people over the years that would have been in classrooms where they might have had 3 languages, and they would have come, they weren't able for it when it went to senior cycle, and they would have applied to come to us. They would have gone back and actually done a junior cycle program on woodwork, metalwork, home economics, and that would have helped them to progress on to a more vocational senior cycle. I've mentioned relationships. I'll talk about the curriculum. The work experience hexagon there, what I would say to you about that is learning from my learning over the last couple of years is a 2-week work placement is by far too short in the education system. Both in leave and cert applied, we would have 2 weeks and we would put young people out. Young people, in my experience, should be going out for 2 months, 3 months of the year, 2 months at least, trying to experience, or even on Saturdays or weekends, getting jobs, you know, in maybe areas of employment that they're interested in. I put up the youth work because the youth work discipline is very much similar to what Youthreach is about, in that when there's an issue or a problem with a young person, it's an opportunity and it's a time to build a relationship and work and support them in fixing that problem or solving them. That's a youth work discipline. When I was a teacher before, it was normally very much disciplinary down the line when I worked in a school. Thank you, Paul. I'm not going to stay on this one. I've already mentioned most of the cycle, but I just wanted to put it up there for people just to have a quick look at it. Integral, and I suppose for me, the success of Youthreach is not only the most important thing. There's 2 aspects for me as a manager of youth provision, and it's the support I get from the organisation. We have various departments, my senior managers, but ultimately we have a very committed, dedicated staff management in each of our staff team and management in each of our centres. And I know one of the questions was around CPD, and just I'll answer CPD now very quickly. Professional development is integral to all our staff as we work.
Thank you very much.
You're not muted there, Paul.
Kind of. It's okay this morning,
but just talking around staff and management there, what is integral is having CPD and a professional development plan, both for the individual staff member, for a centre, in order to do and make sure they can build the capacity to meet the learner's needs. And that's very, very important. So organisationally and as an individual, we would do training needs analysis and develop CPD plans with our CPD officer. Okay, any questions? Will we move on, Paul, please?
Martin, you don't mind if I just stop? There's 2 questions on the chat in relation to Youthreach. Most of these young children are mostly from DESH schools or non-DESH. Do you have any data on this? So they mainly do come, don't they, Martin, from DESH communities?
That's a good question. The profile mainly of the learners over the years has been from areas from disadvantaged areas, and correct, there would be young people then, where there are disadvantaged areas, there would be DESH schools. But that has changed dramatically in the last couple of years. We definitely have a different profile, and it's something I had in my notes to talk about, a different profile of learner coming in. We not only have young people coming from the disadvantaged areas, we have young people coming from broad, different backgrounds across the social spectrum, because young people are presenting with emotional issues, and it's, you know, it can be bullying in a school. And I tend to not look really at the school. I tend to look at what we can do when the young person presents with us. But it is a broad range of people coming from different backgrounds, coming from different countries, and would have had different experiences that for whatever reason they would have left school. But bullying and harassment has been one of the key problems that young people have presented with us. And parenting is a challenge. I have only one, but parenting is a challenge, and there's a lot going on in society today, particularly around social media, stuff like that. And young people can be nasty to each other. And if you go back to what I said earlier, having a very strong code of conduct and being very clear during not only the interview, but the induction stage. And Paul would be very supportive of this as well. There's no disillusionment, no, how would I say this? There's no confusion about what we expect from the young people, and we take it very, very seriously.
If I can come in there as well, just to let everybody know, we have a national MIS system, Management Information System. It's called PLSS, which is the Program Learner Support System. So in that system, we record all the details of our learners from, say, their economic status, their education status, etc., etc. But part of that system also, there is a geo location field, so we can see exactly where that learner is coming from. So in, say, Limerick, well, in Ireland, we have what is known as ED areas, electoral districts, pinpoint exactly the ED area where learners are coming from. Now we have seen over time, well, in the past, a lot of those Youthreach learners did come from ED areas which might have a high deprivation index, a high HDI. But we have actually seen over time, over recent times, that there are learners coming from areas that would not have a high deprivation index, you know. Now, unfortunately, just for the group, Angela, you probably are aware anyway, that in Limerick City, where we are, unfortunately, we have what is known as 17 unemployment black spots. Now, an unemployment black spot is defined as a population area that has more than 200 people, and where the unemployment rate in that area is greater than, I think it's 40%. Okay. So we have, unfortunately, in Limerick City alone, we have 17 unemployment black spots. And unfortunately, 8 of the 10 highest in the country are in the Limerick City area, you know. So unfortunately for us, our figures are slightly, in Youthreach, our figures are more skewed towards learners coming from those unemployment black spots. But if you go to other parts of the country, so for example, there's 79 unemployment black spots in the country in Ireland, the 26 counties. But in Limerick and Clare, we have in total 21 of those. So we actually have 27% of the unemployment black spots. So from our context, the learners coming into our Youthreach provision is more skewed towards coming from an unemployment black spot, a high deprivation area. However, if you go to some of the other ETBs, they don't have that same issue to contend with, you know. So we just have to put it into context as well. But as I said, we have noticed more learners coming from what we would classify as unemployment black spots as well over this past number of years, you know.
Okay.
The other thing to bear in mind as well, Angela, you talked about DESH schools, that you know that the Irish government, through the Department of Education, has invested significant resources into our post-primary education to improve the overall retention rates in our post-primary school. And that has had actually a very positive impact, not across all categories of post-primary education, including DESH schools. The retention rates has actually increased, you know, and in some ETBs in parts of of Ireland, that has had a knock-on impact on reduced numbers coming into the likes of Youthreach because there's less leaving post-primary education. But unfortunately, Limerick and Clare bucked the trend there because of the fact that we have 27% of the unemployment black spots in the country.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's very important there, as Paul said, retention rates in school are much higher and higher, but Youthreach would work very hard and collaborate with the schools. There's, you know, we have a mechanism to ensure that young people just don't pop out and come across to Youthreach. We encourage them to stay. And Paul and I would have done a reconfiguration of Youthreach across Limerick and Clare, which is integral. That the ESRI basically would always have said, and in their last report, as you spoke about earlier, Angela, we were in there before them, and we did a review of the needs across the region, and we restructured and reduced the number of centres we had and placed them in the areas of need. So we enhanced provision, for example, in Ennis. So we move where the need is. We didn't drop our numbers, even though the retention in the schools is higher. We have moved to where the need is. And in any funding mechanism, I suppose I would work with Paul, and we appraise funding applications. You look for the need, you look for the target, and you look for the aims and objectives. And that's a key aspect of it. Okay.
Great. Now, do you mind if I just ask it? There's a couple of other questions here.
Okay.
It just said, Irma said, in Croatia, we have very low levels of school leavers, but we actually force them to stay in school, although they have no interest or will. At the end, they have very, very low skills and knowledge and behavioural issues, as well as problems with absence of lessons. Is it better to let them leave school when they want and be prepared when they come back? It's a chicken and egg.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that straight away and say, you know, leaving somebody. If I'll answer that with a question, who here would stay in the same job every day, feel that they're not able to do it, be totally demoralized in it? I don't know. I mean, I watch films that I'm interested in. I flick on to another channel. You know, when a child comes into a school for 7 or 8 classes a day and things aren't going their way, I think, you know, that's very, very torturous and difficult. I think it's about the child. It's about doing the right thing always by the child. And, you know, why do young people leave school? A plethora of reasons, but it's mainly, you know, relationships, things not working out. And you know, there's a much smaller number of young people leaving now because schools are building those relationships. But it is about, yes, not leaving somebody there for 5 years. In Limerick City, I'm using that as an analogy, and I know Paul has to go soon, and I don't have the presentation, so I'll have to speed up a bit. But in Limerick City,
okay, stay on.
But I think what's very important is, I'll go back to Limerick City. We actually had early school leavers that went back and repeated their junior cert, the junior cycle program, because they knew a couple of things. They knew their literacy wasn't up to speed for them to go and do their leaving cert. I had a young lady that dropped out of junior cert, and I made her go back to the school to sit the junior cert. And when she finished her junior cert, she actually came back to repeat the junior cert, so it would prepare her to go on and do the Leaving Cert.
Yeah.
So
I can come in there as well, Martin, in answering that question from the Croatian colleague there. One reason why a lot of students drop out of school early was the type of curriculum that was offered in schools tended to be very academic in nature. We would have schools here in Limerick City who would be, in that category of being very academic, They would not have a lot of practical vocational type skills development. There are individuals out there who basically are more in terms of vocational skills development. That's where their forte is. And you have also students who are more academically inclined. It's not that one is better than the other, because at the end of the day, our apprentice plumber or our apprentice electrician could actually earn more money than somebody working in an office administration type job, So in terms of Croatia, it depends on what the curriculum is. If the curriculum in the school is not offering a kind of a dual pathway, that you could go down one pathway of more an academic route or another pathway of more a vocational route, then there's no point in trying to force, as Martin said, force somebody to stay in an environment where they just hate it, And as Martin gave a very good example there, if you were in a job that you absolutely hated, would you stay there? You would look for an alternative. And in our case, and it has been shown in our Youthreach evaluation report done by the ESRI, an independent body in Ireland, last year, last year, the year before now, that report, that Youthreach has had a very positive impact, in terms of the overall schooling. And as Mark is, it's just a different approach, to the actual learner, seeing where they're coming from, seeing what their actual interests, etc. Because I think everybody in their own way has some potential, and you just have to tap into that potential. And I know we have had very, very good success with different Youthreach learners who have gone on even to higher education, who've gone on and got very, very good jobs, who've gone on, and we had one, a girl, was it last year, Martin, the year before, that got the top award in the country in terms of the engineering examinations, So it's just looking at their actual potential and just tapping into that and giving them an opportunity to excel.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Martin, what I'll do is there's a few other questions, but I'll leave them till the very end and then we can talk about them because I'm conscious Paul needs to head away.
Perfect, perfect. Just on curriculum development, Paul has already covered that for me, which is great because the curriculum, and it answers the question that was asked already. The curriculum is defined by the learners and by the staff. We can't be all to everybody. We changed, and the learners would have had a huge say into amending it and changing it. And it's the aspect of the vocational skills. It's also the aspect of they wanted the same state exams as everybody else, but also the holistic side of it, the personal development. And we try and make it really, really interested by also doing outdoor activities, outdoor pursuits. We bring in music generation. So it's a broad range of curriculum. And it's about going back to the asset-based approach that you mightn't like English or you mightn't like French, but you also have classes in there that you will be good at so that the day isn't a long day. Because there is a hard, you're not going to get your state senior exam unless you put the work in as well. So they're the 4 accredited courses. The first 3 are the same state exams that you would get if you're in school. Other centres, again, have amended or changed their programmes and would deliver accredited programs up to level 4. Again, one centre might be developing delivering the first 2 this year, and depending on the needs of the learners, they will switch and move and develop maybe the last 2. So it's about flexibility, and it's about the group that is coming in and see what their ability is and what their needs is, with a view to them all progressing on into a level 5 somewhere else or moving on into work. I'm not going to go through the whole list there. I just put that up for you. You need a broad curriculum, you need broad expertise, you also need, you know, psychotherapists, qualified people so as to support the vulnerable young people that are in there, which also supports our staff. And Paul had mentioned it there earlier. I suppose part of the curriculum when it was up, the key point in all of this is that when a young person comes in, that they experience having one good role model in their lives. That's a psychological therapeutic philosophy and theory. I'm not going to go into that now, but it is that every young person comes in, and we believe in a mentoring model where one member of staff would work at the whole social aspect, the educational aspect, and mind and mentor and support that young person on their educational journey within a Youthreach centre. There are 20 Youthreach centres out of 110 that have special funding for special educational needs, and the model is to fund so that you create a staff team to build its capacity and its capability. But a key aspect of that is back to relationships again, that each member of the team would be able to key work or mentor a cohort of learners within a group and within the whole body. Okay. I have 2 or 3 slides there, but I put them down at the end because we won't have time. Key methodologies. I'll summarize a few of them off the top of my head, which are the most important ones. Every child coming in has huge potential. The asset-based approach I mentioned earlier. Learner-centered. Listen to your learners. They have a vision for where they want to go, and if you listen to them, they will give you and your team, your staff team, direction along the way. I'll let you go through those and maybe the slides at the end, and if you want to ask me any more questions on that. Will we move on, Paul? I just put up indicators, and that's going back to the vision for the centre, and we have an internal quality assurance system which will be revised. It's particular now to Youthreach, and it's an annual internal review where you review last year's plan and you develop a new plan, and staff, learners, parents are all involved in that. That plan now will actually that whole quality assurance system is going to be amended, and we'll have a generic one across our FET division. We also, the difference between us currently is, like schools, one of the aspects that we have similar to schools is the inspectors come in, our department come in, and they assess the management, the quality of teaching and learning. For me, I would go down to the very bottom 4 bullets in there. Are your learners attending? Are they progressing? And are they completing? And are they getting a positive experience? Because some people can home in just on the fact that they're happy and they're coming in. No, they have a potential, and we have to support them and realize it. The same as our own child when they go to school, or if they came to a Youthreach centre, we need to progress them on and support them along the way. And that is the challenge, and such is life. So that's a key aspect of that. We have that's just, as I said, the restaurant model. I just put that up and you can have a look at it. And it's asking, are our customers happy? Are our clients coming in happy? And part of the internal review is each centre gets feedback from senior management, Paul and myself. They also get feedback from the staff, the manager, but most important, the learners, the parents, and the employers. And the employers is kind of a new one, which we should have done for years, where they tell us how a young person got on out on a work placement, and it builds a fabulous relationship. So they do like rules, they do like consistency, and they do like praise. And they have as high expectations as management and how people should behave. But it's about strong leadership and having strong vision, both within the centre and having strong leadership then as well, obviously from senior management. I'll just name out a few of the challenges. Recruitment and retention of staff is a positive, and it's also a challenge. We are getting excellent staff, and you know we have recruitment policies and procedures, and that's the very fabric of how the system works. It's about getting staff that actually want to be in a space with young people, That's the key aspect of it. That like working with young people, that like interacting, that like challenging. That's a key aspect that's very, very important. Unfortunately, the terms and conditions are not always the same. They're better maybe in other aspects of even FET. And sometimes some of our staff leave. There's a positive to that, and there's a negative. A negative is we invest huge time, resources, and CPD, and they move on. But the positive too is, you know, we get new people in, and that creates a dynamic as well. So that's that one. I'm going to just go down to the last two bullets, second last two bullets there. The rollout is a special needs initiative I mentioned earlier. Some of our centres don't have that. So Paul and I are looking at that as a project that we'd roll out that initiative to build the capacity and capability of all centres. 3 centres have that project. Staff needs analysis is ongoing. There's a huge for our staff to upskill, and we need to be focused not only in youth provision but across all the other programs I'm responsible for and in FET division, and bring people together for relevant training. And we do that. There's a very clear policy plan, and we have a team there that support the CPD. That's critical. The last challenge there, I just put it in, and I suppose for me, bureaucracy versus the hands-on approach. And that's, for me, I suppose in my role, I actually like the bureaucracy a little bit, because I try and get the balance between interacting and dealing with maybe appeals, dealing with, you know, managers, dealing with IR issues, HR issues. We don't have a lot of them, but just to say that. But for people on the ground managing young people, it's their forte, it's their passion as well, and encouraging them to get the right balance. I think that's very, very important. So just to sum up, our staff are our greatest resource, and we strive to provide a quality education program. Constant review, constant self-reflection is very, very important, and asking our questions and not be afraid to try something new. And I've been very lucky over the years with all the senior managers and managers I've had. They've allowed me, they've given me great autonomy, and I know this has been recorded, but they've allowed my team and my staff to try new, and I'm not afraid to go and ask. And any managers that have ever left have always come back and said we've encouraged them and we've given them autonomy to be different as well, that we're, you know, in the different centres, so they respond to the different needs. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Great.